Good evening. The recent rainfall in Marin comes as a double-edged sword. We desperately need the water after years of drought, but the kind of torrential rain we've seen lately causes flooding and dangerous conditions. Tonight, we're going to talk about how Marin County prepares for floods and what you can do to protect yourself and your home or business. I'm Rich Shortall, Executive Coordinator of Fire Safe Marin. Tonight, we're going to focus on what you can do to prepare and stay safe during a flood. Before we get going, I'd like to begin with a quick look back at some of the major flood events we've seen here in Marin.
Road's closed, go! That way, turn around!
Well, as you saw, we have a long history with floods here in Marin. But fortunately, we also have a layered emergency plan that depends on a well-coordinated effort among emergency responders, service providers, and our residents. Marin Fire, Police, Health and Human Services, the Red Cross, and Marin County officials work with the Office of Emergency Management to reduce flood risks, assist with evacuations if needed, and help people in need. Tonight, we're fortunate to have some great guests with us. To my right, we have Sean Condry, Director of Public Works and Building for San Anselmo, and Battalion Chief of the Ross Valley Fire Department, Gavin Illingworth. And they're going to explain what residents and business owners in flood-prone areas can do to prepare. We've also invited Chad Klein, Caltrans Maintenance Manager, to discuss flood mitigation efforts throughout the county. All of our guests are here to answer your questions. Please type them in the Q&A function, and we'll bring them up in our conversation throughout the show. All right, with that, I'm going to turn to Sean. And Sean, what actions does your Public Works Department take in preparation of a flood event?
So before, during, and after any flood event, the San Anselmo crew will go out and do storm patrol. And we'll literally be looking at storm drains, to looking in the creek for downed trees. They'll also stage sand and sandbags for the residents. Crew will also be on standby during a big storm event. We will work with the merchants in getting their floodgates out and giving them a heads up that a storm is coming.
A lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
And also, is that true, would you say, of other public works agencies throughout the county?
Yeah, it's true of, I would say, all the public works in Marin County and other agencies. We all have to prepare both the storm drain systems and looking at the creeks, also looking for potential trees that could come down. And so it's true throughout Marin County.
Great, well, thank you. Well, Chad, I assume that it's a big task for Caltrans. What do you do to prepare?
Like Sean, we go through, and before storms, we're always prepping, looking for DIs, making sure there's no debris on our drain grates. Good prep always leads to hopefully a successful endeavor going through a big major storm event. Other things we do is, we prep our equipment beforehand, so it's in good operating condition, ready to roll. Then during the storms, we're looking for trees down, possible slope stability, checking slopes for any rockfall that could be coming down or potential, clean it up as we need to go. One of the big things like this last big storm was we changed our employee shifts, and we worked 12-hour shifts, 24 hours a day. And that gave us the ability to have the best response time to try to mitigate any hazard on the roadway, keeping the traveling public moving.
So are you prepared then to respond anywhere in Marin, wherever help is needed?
Yes, Caltrans responds to all state highways in Marin County.
Great, a big task.
Big task.
Yeah. And Gavin, what do fire departments do to prepare?
Yeah, preparation's the name of the game, it sounds like. We're the same way. First thing we do is make sure our families and our homes are safe before we come to work, because we may be there a while. Usually we're working 48 to 96-hour shifts during this time. And then we upstaff our fire stations. So obviously making sure everything's ready, our stations are ready, our generators are ready, and then we actually upstaff pickup trucks as well to help out with power lines down, or if there's like different types of emergencies that people have to sit on for a while, or a big tree that needs to be cleared, we can assist DPW with that, or they can come assist us. So a lot of preparation goes into different types of emergencies. So we do that. We'll get our floodgates ready for our fire stations, and particularly in San Anselmo and Fairfax, that's a risk that we have. So we'll prepare our floodgates just like other businesses in the town does. And then regionally, we have swiftwater rescue teams and urban search and rescue teams that get prepared and strategically are placed throughout the county in case there's a need for a swiftwater rescue or a type of mudslide rescue or building collapse or something of that sort.
Well, with this specialized equipment and whatnot, is there a lot of training that you do in advance to be prepared?
Yeah, that's pretty much what we do is train throughout the year. Obviously we think of firefighters being ready for the wildland fires and the structure fires, but we train on swiftwater rescue coming into the fall and into the winter in preparation for this. And then different people throughout the county in each department are specially trained in urban search and rescue and also in swiftwater rescue, and they're a part of those teams. So those are all regional efforts of those crews.
Yeah. Well, I think we can hear that our public agencies do a lot of preparation in advance. And of course, you're pretty experienced in this, I would assume. Like, we've been down this path before, so it's great to know that's there. Let's focus a little bit more on individual residents. So Sean, what are some of the things that you do that are very resident focused?
Resident focused, well, we actually have our sandbags that we prepare for residents so they can come get those. Typically what happens is during a storm event, we go around to all the storm drains and we actually ask residents to help watch the storm drains and even help clean them if they can in front of their homes. We also tell people, during a storm event, don't come out if it's a flood event is imminent. But we work with residents, before, during, and after the storms at all times.
That's great. You mentioned sandbags. I know, like a lot of jurisdictions in Marin, there are sandbag stations. I've seen people doing all kinds of crazy things when they're filling up. Any recommendations for the public?
Yeah, definitely. One of the biggest mistakes we see with sandbags is that people will tend to overstuff them. They make them, so full of sand that they actually can't stack them. And so what we recommend is they fill them about a third of the way with sand. The town, will supply the sandbags and the sand, and there might be a shovel there, but we actually tell people to bring their own shovel just in case. And if they fill them correctly, they can actually create a good barrier against flooding.
Well, that's great. You mentioned floodgates. What is a floodgate?
A floodgate is typically actually more for commercial buildings or public buildings, not for residential. But typically what a floodgate is a barrier at a door that prevents floodwaters from coming in. The really good ones can actually compress against the sides of the door, prevent water from coming in, and then people can also put sandbags in front of those. And they're required actually throughout the downtown corridor in San Anselmo for the businesses.
Oh, that's great. Are there other parts of Marin that use them?
Floodgates, I believe, are all used all throughout Marin. And you also get points with the CRS system from FEMA, which lowers people's flood insurance rates when we require them.
Well, that's a big win. I'm glad you're there to help with that.
Yes.
And the last thing, individual residents is kind of logical. You want to clear the leaves and other debris out of the drains and the entrances. I know a lot of people have French drains and whatnot. Are they foolproof, or sometimes they clog up, and what should people do about that?
They are not foolproof, especially French drains can have what's called a sock on them that prevents fines from getting there, but they clog up over time. But it's best if, to check your system before a flood event. You can actually run water and see if it's draining correctly. But if it's not working well, we recommend that you get a contractor or an engineer to look at it. Every circumstance may be different to see what's going on with it.
Yeah, so be proactive is the
Yes.
way to go. All right. And Chad, it's a little bit different for you guys, but I think you're dealing with residents behind the wheel of the car all the time. Any special advice for them?
Yes, I would always say abide by our closures and our signs. Closures and signs are out there for a reason. Partly make sure to keep us safe, the people who are working in the closures, in the work zone, and traveling public, because just because you might go through something, you don't know what is on the backside of the closure or what could be around the corner for what the flood risk is, or hazard, tree down, power pole down, many facets of reasons why we have closures out there. But the closures are there and the signs are in place for the safety of us on site and the traveling public.
Is it ever okay to drive around the signs?
Never okay to drive around the signs.
Yeah, I think we've all seen that happen. That's an important takeaway, I think, for everybody. Great. And one of the things that comes up, Gavin, is alerting. So these things are coming. People know that that there might be flood or some rain. But are there some special systems and warnings in place to help Marin residents?
Yeah, so that's a good point. I think ahead of time, this is different than a wildland fire that comes out of nowhere, right? We can prepare for these things. So hopefully you're already paying attention to the weather stations and you're up on the news. But then in the event of an emergency and when it actually starts to flood, Alert Marin is the best tool that we have to get a hold of residents to be able to tell them what to do in the event of that actual emergency. And we can target specific neighborhoods, streets, or areas. And then we can use Nixle as well, which is a great, more broadcasting of information type of tool. And then the weather system, the radios, the weather radios are another great tool. And then EAS, the emergency alert system as well. So there's a lot of different ways to get information out these days.
Well, that's great. So it's really important to sign up for these things and be aware of them. One of the things that comes up all the time in any kind of emergency is parents really get concerned. The kids are at school, they're at work, and is everybody okay? What's the recommendation for parents in terms of working with schools in the event of emergency like flooding?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? I mean, during an emergency, you want to be by your family, and it's something that we don't really think about, but your kids go and they're somewhere else every day. And so every school does it differently, or some schools may do it differently. So know how your particular school gets a hold of you in the event of an emergency, whether it's a phone call, an email. There's apps like Parent Square or Google Classroom. There's a lot of different tools out there. So just know what your school uses, and then that way they'll be able to contact you and you'll be ready to get your kid and get home safe.
Good advice for parents, I think. Last one, in our wildfire world, evacuations are always a big concern with the public. Are evacuations something that's done very often in these flooding scenarios?
So it's kind of interesting because in floods, what you're probably hearing is to not be out in the roadway and not be out where the flooded water is. So it's kind of usually the opposite. It's stay home. And so in the event of a flooding, we may actually put on Alert Marin a shelter-in-place warning if that's needed. And so basically just trying to tell everybody, hey, stay home. That's the safest place for you right now. If everybody has their food, and we'll get into lanterns and battery powered stuff and not using candles, but that's the best thing that you can do. So there are particular incidents where if there was a mudslide or something like that, we might be evacuating people nearby there, or a gas leak or something like that, because flooding can cause a lot of other, a tree to hit a power line that does something, so there's particular circumstances, so not never, but usually a shelter in place would be the ticket.
Yeah, so a real key to shelter in place preparedness, it's coming, it could last for a couple of days, stock up. Make sure you have food, make sure you have your basic supplies in place. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's good. And of course, one of the things, as you brought up, Sean, is that power goes off during these things. So any special advice of how people should be dealing with potential power outages?
Well, what's been happening a lot lately is we've been getting a lot of people installing generators, which is becoming more common. A lot of portable generators, and one of the most important things is for people who may have medical needs is, for power. And so we ask people that they get ready for something like that, stock up on batteries. It's talked about stocking up on LED lights or flashlights. So that's power is something that we all take for granted, as we learned during a PSPS. And so it's something that we can prepare for in terms of having our basic needs in terms of a to-go kit or a stay kit as discussed. So
Great. Well, I'm going to make a little bit of a pitch here. So it's true that sometimes residents have life-saving devices that depend on power. And if the power goes out, you can't get a little small battery to power it. The Marin Center for Independent Living, and we'll put this in the chat, has a program where they will bring batteries to you, the large ones that will power that medical equipment. So in order to be prepared, make contact with Marin Center for Independent Living. They're just a great
it's a
resource.
great service, yeah.
Yeah, they're fantastic. Let's see, I think we'll move on to Chad. So we have flooding that comes from storms and rain, but do you deal with other flood events?
Yeah, in southern Marin, we flood Marin 1 at 101 just due to tidal water. It's nationally known as king tides, but high tides, king tides will flood our local highway down there. You should be prepared that during these events that the road will be closed for a couple hours till we get through the tide cycle, till we can open it back up. And again, we close the road for the safety of the traveling public, not to drive through it so they don't get stuck and then they have to get rescued by the fire department. So
Yeah.
we're down there trying to help everyone out, keep them safe.
Right, and it doesn't take much to get stuck. You don't need 10 feet
Doesn't.
of water, right?
Nope, inches will do it, especially these days, low profile cars, anything else. And even if they don't turn off, they'll float. People don't think so, but their car will float. Next thing you know, it's in the ditch.
Oh my gosh, all right, great advice. So Gavin, we have a lot of creeks, a lot of water going down them, swift water, it's flowing really fast. Any specific safety recommendations to the public about creeks that are going fast?
Stay away from them. I think, this is something that we're used to all year round. These creeks are fun to play in for the kids, and man, they're awfully tempting when they're rushing and everybody wants to go look at them and see what's going on down by the creek. How high is it? And I know when I was a kid, my big brother would go and they'd get in the creek. That was like the thing to do. So it's probably the most dangerous thing you could possibly do during these events is go be near the creek, because one slip into that thing, the water is powerful and it's relentless. So swift moving waters, it's incredibly dangerous. So really trying to make sure you know where your kids are and they're not down there playing by the creek.
Yeah, so we're kind of recommending against rafting, right?
Yeah, it's probably not the best idea. I highly recommend against rafting.
All right, sounds good. One more thing, and we were talking about the power outages, and the recommendation was with batteries. What about using candles?
So, I mean, that's super dangerous, right? You got this free burning candle in your house when there's no power, and you might light a bunch of them in the house and forget one. And so it's a real high risk for us. It's something that we're thinking about as firefighters, when these power outages happen is, we hope everybody has a different way of making light, basically. So battery powered lanterns are LED now. They last forever on a couple batteries, and they're really bright. They're pretty cheap these days. So, really highly recommend making sure you have those instead of candles.
Sounds like a good plan. All right, well, let's take a few questions from the audience here. Do any of the Marin municipalities have a program to adopt a drain where they could go out there and something like the freeway?
We have the Public Works Village Volunteers, as they call them. We have only right now about half a dozen residents who actually help clean storm drains. So in San Anselmo, I don't know what the other jurisdictions, we do actually have people who come help us and do everything from cleaning storm drains to doing storm patrol. And we'll give you a rake, a hat, and a shovel.
There you go. All right. So, by the way, what is a French drain? Maybe we didn't explain that.
A French drain is like a trench drain that's around the perimeter of a building that is used to basically collect water that's coming towards your house and then send it off to where it should be, as opposed to undermining your foundation or causing other harm to your home.
Great. So if somebody does observe a hazard during one of these flood events, who should they contact?
Usually you call 911 if there's a hazard.
Yeah.
So 911 will contact whether it's fire or the police, and also Public Works.
Yeah, I think that's really, if you really think it's a hazard, I think that's probably the safest event. So what is the best way for the public to stay aware of, and I, particularly for you, Chad, on this, on which roadways are open and closed. Is there a system for that?
Yeah, Caltrans has what's known as quick maps. You can just look it up, type it up on the web browser, Caltrans Quick Maps, and there's many functions on it. It'll tell you what roads are open, closed. It'll tell you hazards. It'll tell you not only just closure, or what roads are open and closed. It'll tell you actual closures, speed of traffic, and where it's flowing at the time, and any sorts of incidents in the area. Along with, if you're liking to look at snow in the Sierras, the cameras are there for view too, for all over the Bay Area plus throughout the state.
I've actually taken advantage of that myself. I think you head up to snow country. It's great. It's just a wonderful system, and you really see what's going on up there. I've also, somebody mentions that PG&E will sometimes supply a battery for the people who have medical needs. They may know anything about that.
I don't know.
I don't.
I'm not sure about PG&E programs.
So we'll check into that, and we'll put something in the chat in here when we find out about that, or we can follow up with Fire Safe Marin. We'll get an answer for you on that. And if you're out driving around and you happen to notice a hazard, who should be called for that?
Well, for emergency hazard, I would say 911. That is the go-to to get a hold of any agency.
Okay.
Especially if you don't know what jurisdiction you're in or who should be the responsible party. They'll be able to take care of that for you.
All right, sounds good. Okay, well, I think that takes care of some of the main questions that were out there. Again, I think what we've really seen is that our public agencies are really take a lot of steps in advance. They train, they do so forth so that we can be prepared for these things. We'll have some takeaways when we come up here in a few minutes out there. I think that if there's a few more questions that pop up here before we wrap up, we can come back to them. But meanwhile, what I'd like to do is, based on some of what we said tonight, to go over a few takeaways for the public so that you can really think what you needed to prepare when you're at home. The first thing you need to do is sign up for alerts. Alert Marin and Nixle are really the way to go. Lots of information comes out of them. As Gavin pointed out, they could be targeted to your area so that if you are having a particular flood problem in your area, Alert Marin or Nixle can just target you very specifically on that. Power outages are a big thing. Everybody hates them. We've all been through them. Probably the most important thing you can do is be sure that you have fresh batteries for radios and flashlights. And I would actually recommend getting basically what we would call a lantern, which is really more effective than a flashlight. You set those up, puts a lot of light around the room and whatnot, and really try to avoid using candles. Unfortunately, despite us being careful, you turn it on in the middle of the night and then the candle goes out, and next thing you know, you have a fire in there. So batteries are really important, and plan in advance for all of that. Just like the public works departments go out there and clear drains, everybody has drains on their property, so you want to make sure those are clear. And that includes the gutters. So you want to make sure your gutters are free of leaves, the drains are clear. And if you do rely on French drains, which we described as a way to really carry water away from foundations and whatnot, you can test those in advance by running some water through them. And then if it looks like they're going to need repairs, call a professional and they can take care of that for you. But they are really important. If those get blocked up, you're going to end up with a flooded basement in your house. Sandbags, we see residents out using sandbags. It's great. I think almost every community in Marin has some kind of a sandbag station where you can go out there and fill up. But the important thing is don't fill those bags all the way to the top. Fill them about halfway. And the reason is you're going to be able to need to stack them. And if they're overfilled, they don't stack very well. So that's really, if you do that right, it can provide a very effective barrier. You can use those in front of doorways, or as we mentioned, floodgates. Again, those are kind of mostly for businesses, but they're often made out of wood, and that with a combination of the sandbags can keep water out of the business. So another thing is, as part of this learning system, a lot of the communities in Marin have horns or other outdoor warning devices, and when those goes off, it probably means it's too late to start preparing. It means the flooding in your neighborhood is really very imminent. If you hear those, first thing is go to higher ground if you know that you're in an area that potentially can flood. And for everybody else, please stay home. What we really don't want is, oh, I'm hearing the horn. It must be kind of exciting to see what's going on downtown where all the flooding is taking place. That's a dangerous place to be, and you're really not helping all of our public agencies if you do that. So please stay home. Roadside closures. Chad, I think, really stressed this, but I can't say strongly enough that if there's a sign out saying the road is closed, not only is it for your safety to stay out of there, but oftentimes they're working in those areas. And if you start passing through there, that's a danger to everybody involved. So that's kind of an important one to take home with you. And of course, standing water is dangerous. You don't want to drive through it. You think, oh, that only looks like it's a couple of inches deep. Well, actually, some of the modern cars, that's about all it takes for them to stall out. And oftentimes, the water is a lot deeper than you think it is. If you get in there, as was pointed out again by Chad, cars can float. The next thing you're floating away and you're off in a ditch or somewhere you really don't want to be. And we don't want to have Gavin come and rescue you, even though they're prepared for that. And then you really want to stay clear of the creeks and flowing water. Remember, after the rain's out, a lot of times these creeks are running really fast for a couple of days, and that's kind of an attraction sometimes for kids to play in them. That is a really, really dangerous. That water's moving fast. Please stay away, make sure your kids are not playing there. So with that said, I'd like to turn and I'd like to really thank everybody who was here tonight. Did just a great job, provided a lot of really great information for us. It's good to know you're out there helping all of us. And if people have follow-up questions, they can send them to Fire Safe Marin, and we'll get hold of you guys and you can give us the answer and we'll get back to the public. So thank you very much.
you.
Thank
all of you.
Yeah.
And I'd like to give a special thanks to Miranda Miller from who's the Ross Valley Emergency Coordinator, who put all of this together and really did a lot of work on that. To TVO Studios, our staff, and of course our guests tonight. We really appreciate all of that. Hopefully this was helpful for everybody and there were some good takeaways for you. With that, I'm going to say, please be prepared. That'll keep you safe. And with that, we'll say goodnight.